Formatting spreadsheets in Excel. I've got the income file ready for me to format. We've got text, numbers, and formulas in the spreadsheet, and each one of these cells can be formatted no matter what type of data we have. However, you do want to be consistent when it comes to formatting, so that perhaps your total rows can be currency, and even your column for your total can be currency style, and then the numbers for each one of the income and expenses could be a different look as well. Those are just some ideas that you can be working with when it comes to formatting. But we're going to start off with our text. And when I select A4 down to A8 by doing a shift click, and then control click on A12 to skip over, and another shift click onto A21, so that's some selecting skills for you, I can, as a grouping, affect what's selected by maybe indenting. Be nice to see that these headings here be indented in a little bit so that they're not flush left like their headings above. When I'm at that Home tab on the ribbon, Alignment Group, you can see these two commands here. This one, when I hover, says decrease indent as the screen tip, and this one here reads increase. When I click once, you can see how I've got an indentation for each one of these cells. But I might need to widen up my column at some point, because when you indent, it's going to push over that content and be hidden if there's neighboring content to the right. We'll get to widening up columns in just a few minutes. Sparkle Cleaning Company in A1 needs to be merged, I feel, all the way across to N1, so that, or pardon me, O1, so that we have our heading all the way across and nicely centered in the middle of our data. A1 contains Sparkle Cleaning Limited as its text, so we have to click there first to tell Excel where's the starting point. The ending point I'm going to shift click on, which is O1. Then when I go back to that Home tab, Alignment Group, you can see how I have the merge and center command here when I point to it. Looks like an A with some arrows on either side of it. When I click here, immediately Excel responds by merging A1 with all the way up to and including O1, and it becomes a large A1 now. Plus it's been centered. Do you see how this command here is in orange, telling us that it's on? In other words, it is active in this cell that we're in. If I press tab, it takes me to P1, and when I go backwards using my left arrow, you can see how I'm back to A1. That's a large merged cell. There's other options when it comes to merge and center, and when I click on the down arrow here, you can see merge across, merge cells, and unmerge cells. We're going to target unmerged cells so you can see what happens when I click on it, and it takes me back to what it looked like before when it comes down to A1 Housing Sparkle Cleaning Limited. But you see how it only unmerged? It didn't uncenter. I've got center alignment still here. When I click on my left alignment, I've got my left alignment for A1 now. So unmerge does not unmerge and uncenter. Unmerge truly just unmerges. So if you need to readjust the alignment, then you focus in on one of the three alignment choices. I showed you where center is. We just worked with left. But if we wanted to do a right alignment for all of the cells that are selected right now, we click on that right text alignment here. And in this case, it wouldn't be what we would want to remain as the alignment for A1, and probably not for these one cells. So we'll just go back to left alignment, and then you can see how it readjusts it. But I changed my mind again. I do want to merge and center, so keeping this portion still selected, I go back to merge and center, and now I've got my A1 here with it merged and centered. Let's highlight some numbers. So I do a shift click from B4 to M8, control click on B12, and do a shift click on M21, and I'm going to stop here. Back to this number grouping, from the Home tab, you'll see that we've got a currency style and we've got the comma. I'm going to click on comma, and when I click on comma, immediately you'll see dollar signs across these cells. And what that means is the content is too wide for its container. In other words, we've got some numbers here that are too big for the columns. They need to be widened. So when you see pound signs, that does not mean an error message. It just means you need to widen up the columns. As a matter of fact, we also need to widen up column A because wholesale distributors is not being shown in this column A. So when I would land up printing, I wouldn't see the entire heading. So let's talk about how to widen up columns here before we go any further with any of the other number formats. I'm going to highlight column A all the way to column O by doing a shift click. Then I'm going to go to any one of the headings here or column labels and put my mouse in between one of the borders. When I have a double-headed arrow, I'm going to double click to automatically adjust so that Excel respects the widest entry in the column and makes that column fit that widest entry. I can see my wholesale distributors now on the screen, as well as I can certainly see how Excel has made some elbow room for my comma style for each one of the numbers. I may need to readjust my columns a few times when I am doing some formats. So I've done a shift click from my B2 to B9, my B9 to my N9, and then I'm going to do a control click and another shift click on my totals. So what I'm doing is I'm just setting myself up so that I can do a multi-range selection at the same time, so I don't have to singularly highlight portions and then find another style. This time I'm going to choose my number style called currency, and when I point to the currency, when I point to the dollar sign, it comes up with accounting. So I'm going to click on the dollar sign, and when I do that, you can see how the dollar signs appear next door to these numbers. Plus, by default, I have 2 decimal points for each one of these cells. And you can see the numbers above. We have 2 decimal points as well. Everything's nicely getting lined up here. My net income and loss, I could have had as part of the grouping as well, but perhaps I want to spice this up a little further. So we're going to go back to accounting, and when I click on accounting, I sometimes call it currency. It's pretty well the same thing here, except when you click on this drop down here for number format right above this dollar sign, you can see how there is a currency style, and it's a little bit different when you compare currency to accounting. Watch the screen down here below when I focus back to accounting. Accounting lines up with the decimal point for your comma styles. So when you choose currency, just do a heads up, you'll still get that dollar sign, but it's not going to line up with any other numbers if you've chosen the comma. So we'll go back to accounting here. Let's make it so that these cells stand out more than the others. Maybe we want to shade or fill in the color here, say it's sort of like an orange, so it stands out. Then we come to average income all the way to lowest income. I'm going to highlight those groupings, hit the accounting, and when I do that, maybe I want to return back, so I have an orange paint can, and when I click on that orange paint can, it gives me the same color from what I had before. Going further, we can certainly spice up these headings here, and when I do a control click on these two, I'm going to take us to the styles group and work with cell styles here, and perhaps maybe choose heading 2, for example. Working with Sparkle Cleaning Limited, maybe now I want to choose heading 1. And when I choose heading 1, you're suddenly going to see that maybe some of that data isn't going to be shown on the screen. So what are we going to do to make this column, or pardon me, this row higher so we can see the content here? between row 1 and 2, and when I double click, it heightens the row, and that in this case row 1 becomes higher so that it can accommodate the size of the font for heading 1. So if you want to manipulate row 1, you need to be in between rows 1 and 2, and when you get that double-headed arrow, you can even manually adjust the height if you like by simply clicking and dragging at this point and having a manual adjustment to the height. You can do the same with columns as well. So in between A and B, for example, it's going to affect column A. I can widen up the column, and now I've got more elbow room for my content. Let's finish up with a few more examples of formats, and then you can play within the Home tab, font groups, alignment group, number, and styles on your own. Let's select total income, total expense, and we'll just manually adjust it here if we want. We can use bold, we could use italics, and maybe when we want to change the paint can, let's just say we want blue. And when we get over to net income, perhaps we want to make it a different font color. So when I click on the down arrow here, I can change it to another color, and you see how live preview is taking over here. When I hover over any one of these colors, I have a preview of what it's going to look like down here. Average income all the way down to lowest. Why don't we choose yet another color? And again, I'm just experimenting. It would make sense to have the same look or feel to your spreadsheet, in that you're picking colors that are complementary to each other. But for the sake of experimentation, I just wanted you to see some different colors here. I fiddle around with my colors here so that we've got at least some sort of consistent look to some of my totals and formulas when it comes to the headings. Let's move on to the headings here in row 3. So starting with January, I'm going to select all the way to percent, and when I select up to my 03, I want to show you some other alignment choices here when it comes to orientation. So I'm focused in here in this command, and when I click on the down arrow, you can see how I can change the angle. And when I angle counterclockwise, I've got my headings now on the side. This is especially handy if you have larger labels than the content below, and you find yourself doing an auto fit just for those labels. You can put those labels at an angle and then reclaim some real estate for other content, so that when you print, you don't have extra pages just because of these large headings. So remember, we went to the alignment group and we focused in on this command here called orientation. So there's some other cool choices here you can experiment with.